rise above the static, dissecting issues diplomatic. With mics in hand, they brave the storm of clashing views and norms transform. The Pundits Podcast, bold and true, shining light on red and blue. Through heated takes and reasoned thought, they seek the truth that can't be bought. From climate change to foreign ties, they pass the spin and sift the lies. No stone unturned, no topic taboo, as left and right come into view. The Pundits Podcast, bold and true, shining light on red and blue. Through heated takes and reasoned thought, they seek the truth that can't be bought. From climate change to foreign ties, they pass the spin and sift the lies. No stone unturned, no topic taboo, as left and right come into view. The Pundits Podcast, bold and true, shining light on red and blue. Through heated takes and reasoned thought, they seek the truth that can't be bought. In times of strife when tensions flare, their steady voices fill the air. With wisdom gained from years gone by, and hopes for brighter days tonight, the Pundits Podcast marches on their epic quest, not yet done, to understand our changing world and keep democracy's flag unfurled.
Hey everybody, we are here for conversation number 8, and we will be talking about the debate and some other things, and rate and review our podcast and all that stuff. So we are recording actually. Yeah.
You were going to say this, but I just want people to know, because normally we record this on Friday and it comes out Saturday morning. And so if you're out there and you're thinking, oh, great, the week is over because there's a new conversations, I'm sorry to have to break it to you, but actually we decided to record earlier this week because of the debate and everything.
Yeah, if you're anchoring to us for the end of the week, we apologize. All right. Let me I watched the debate with some friends. I don't honestly, I don't think debates usually have much of an impact. I think you agree, but saying that aside, it's still fun to talk about. So give me your general take, and I will give you mine.
Yeah, and let me first talk a little bit about the debates don't matter point, because it's my view. This is what the social science on the question says, although maybe we can talk later on about what that means. But in general, if you look at the debates, I looked presidential debates, I think the first one was in 1960 between Kennedy and Nixon, and then they skipped a couple.
You mean broadcast debates? Because weren't there
there were no radio presidential debates.
I got it. Okay.
The first presidential debate was Nixon versus Kennedy in 1960. And then there weren't any for a while. There were the next presidential debate was in 1976, Ford versus Carter. And since then, there's always been at least one, usually 3. And if you could go back and look at if you think about, well, what are some of the examples of debates that are supposed to have mattered, right? So people talk about Kennedy versus Nixon. That was a debate where supposedly people who saw the debate thought Kennedy won, whereas people who heard it on the radio thought Nixon won. I don't actually know if that's true or if that's just a social science legend, right? I wasn't able to find out substantiation for that one or the other, but it does. Whether someone has declared the winner of the debate, does that translate into a change in who people vote for? There doesn't seem to be any evidence of that. Another big example that people give is in 1984, Ronald Reagan in the first debate seemed kind of like aimless and showing his age. And there was a lot of talk in the media about was this going to be an issue for him? And of course, he did the second debate, did fine. And so it kind of went away. But there's no effect. There's no polling that indicates that the first debate actually hurt him. And the other big case that people talk about in 1976, Gerald Ford said on the debate stage that Poland was not under communist domination. And this was not just a slip of the tongue. You know, the moderator was like, are you sure? Do you mean something? What do you mean? And he's like, yeah, no, I actually don't know what he meant, because obviously Poland was under communist domination.
Yeah, the brain freeze or something.
Yeah. But so that's supposed to be the like ultimate debate gaffe of all time, but he actually went up in the polls after that. I don't think that's because of the debate. But he did go up in the polls. And so generally, you know, people go into the debates. I think the idea is it's like they do it like they're watching a sporting event, right? They want to root for their team, you know, but it's not changing anybody's minds, especially these days when, as I say, there aren't that many undecided voters, and the ones they are what you call like low engagement. They're probably not taking a couple hours out of their day to watch a debate. People, I think, people always want to overestimate the importance of debates, and I think they might have done that even more so this time, because there is now one example of a debate that mattered, which is Biden versus Trump, you know, back in June. And yes, okay, so that's what you might call an out of sample event, right? The problem there, it's not just that Biden had a poor debate performance, it's that he is undergoing significant cognitive decline and had been hiding that, and the press had kind of been hiding it, and now it was obvious. And you know, the press, I actually think even with Biden, I mean, one, if you look at the polling, he did go down in the polls, but not by a huge amount, right? Like he lost a few points in the polls. And I think that a lot of that was not just the debate per se, but that the media turned on him, right? It was because the debate happened in June, it was still early enough to replace him. The media and the party decided, hey, we got to get this guy out of there. We got to get somebody else or we're going to lose. And so Biden was no Democrat can withstand the treatment by the media that Republicans get normally, in my opinion. You know, like this was the weird thing about that 3-week period or however long it was that they were treating Democrats the way they normally treat Republicans, you know? And so he couldn't, so that was, that obviously I would say magnified the debate performance. Whereas if you had the exact same debate, but it was in October, I suspect that the media would have gone a lot easier on him because they would have known it's too late to do anything about it. We don't want Trump to win. And maybe it wouldn't have, like, it still would have hurt him, I think, but not as much as it actually ended up doing, where it knocked him out of the race. So, okay, so that's a long prelude, not talking about the debate. Last night, Trump versus Kamala, I thought, I mean, it was not a lot of fun to watch. It was, you know, I don't think either of them did particularly well. Kamala did fine, I guess. You know, there was, I think, she's been avoiding the media. And so there's a lot of stuff about how she's not great in an unscripted environment. And I think part of what happened is she seems to have been really well trained. So even though it was an unscripted environment, she had a script. You know, a lot of her lines seemed very canned.
Yeah.
And that seemed to work out okay for her. I don't think she did great, but she eliminated the downside risk of doing anything, you know, awful. And Trump, you know, he was his normal blustery self. I think people already know who he is, so I don't think it will hurt him. Obviously, there were various answers where I would have answered the question differently. I don't know that he's not always. Trump is very good at like making quips or off the cuff comments, but making a sustained rebuttal to what somebody says he's not always the best on that. Even when, there were times where Harris would say something that was not true. Like she would make an accusation that was not true or that had an obvious rebuttal. And Trump would Trump, there was a moment, and this has happened a bunch, so it's not like it was out of the blue, but, Harris said something about how Donald Trump had called neo-Nazis very fine people in Charlottesville, right? So this is something that Democrats have been saying about Trump for years. Biden said it a lot. And if you look at like the media, like CNN, Snopes, everybody has kind of said now, okay, that he did not say that, right? He did use the words very fine people, but he was talking about another, like people who are opposed to taking down a statue of Robert E. Lee. And he explicitly said, I'm not talking about neo-Nazis or white supremacists or whatever. So he's, Harris makes this criticism of him, and he says, well, this has been debunked by Sean Hannity, right? Which I'm sure it has been debunked by Sean Hannity, which is fine, but I don't think that's the strongest response if you're trying to explain to the American people what happened, So there was stuff like that, but overall, I don't think it really moved the needle that much. Prediction markets did, Trump did go down a bit in prediction markets, a few percent. I actually think that's probably a mistake. I think it's gonna revert or whatever. But
yeah,
it certainly was not a game changer, as they say. What did you think?
Yeah, so I watched it with a friend. I'm not gonna say who it is, with someone who is very
How is JD doing?
Doing well. Yeah, but so the prediction markets moved like 3 points, and he seems stressed out.
Right.
And I was basically like, oh, it's the same. And he was like, no, it's not the same at all. It's a totally different number. And I was just like, it's 50-50.
Right.
Within the margin of, I was just like, it basically didn't change. That's what I was trying to get at. But it definitely irritated him because he's like, it changed, Anyway, yeah.
For comparison, I was watching the prediction markets during the Biden debate, even before it had ended. I think he went down, over 20 points in the nomination market, right?
Yeah, that was like a serious hit.
Yeah, and I think he went down maybe 10 in the, presidency or whatever, so.
Okay, so the thing with the Biden, though, I think part of what was going on, and by the way, I made I made several bets on that, and I collected, because, people were saying, oh, he's too stubborn. I'm like, oh, that's fine, but I don't think that's true. I think that what was going on with Biden, though, is people were pricing in not the debate, but the fact that was going to happen again and again and again.
Right.
And at some point, people would just be like, okay, this is ridiculous.
You can't recover from it, and you also can't, it prevents you from being able to effectively talk about anything else, mount a.
No, I mean, he could have recovered from it. He could have done like a 6-hour AMA and like been like super on it without notes, like he was like a 25-year-old extemporaneous debate champion. If he did that, he would have recovered.
He would have done that if he had not, like the thing is,
there's a structural underlying problem that was exposed by the debate. Right. He was never going to recover from it because it was exposing a reality.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I will say about debates is I think maybe they illustrate dynamics or trends or tendencies, and they're not game changers. They don't tell us anything new about these people. So I don't think the way Trump or Kamala behaved, whether it was good or bad, and how they executed, I don't think that they behaved in any way that would surprise anybody. It was basically, okay, this is how they're. When she's on her A game, she's really good with her canned lines that are obviously prepared, et cetera, et cetera. And then Trump was really good. He's very good improvisationally and somewhat extemporaneously. So, for example, near the end, he seemed to want to talk about a lot of different things that he had been told, bring those up. But he had never brought those up, right? It's just like he was like, oh, crap, I got to do this, That's not his strength, Like his strength is like focusing on what he wants to talk about. I think that's what was going on. I will say, I think it's an illustrating that, people are saying it's 2016. I don't think it's 2016 because I think Hillary was a historically well-known and unliked candidate. So I think that's one thing. and Trump was new. And I think 8 years into it, he's 8 years older. So I don't think he's like 50% as good at what he's, at his performance, but I think maybe he's 85. All right. So on the margin, I think he's declined a little bit. Also, I think, he showed irritation, and he let Kamala's canned lines get to him sometimes and deviate, where again he could have focused more on issues where he's strong. Also, this is not a change, but this is a reinforcement. I don't know what the hell was going on with his abortion answer. I mean, some of it made sense, but some of it was like, at some point, he said he's against a ban. And then I'm like, okay, like, what ban are you? I think I know what you're saying, but you should be very explicit on what you're talking about there, mostly for your own audience, because for your constituents, because a lot of them are a little irritated with you. So do not say anything that introduces having to have follow up, And so it was like, I don't know. He was just rambling on that question.
I thought his abortion answer was okay, actually, in that he did a couple of things. One is he did say that, look, we're giving it back to the states, and if you're going to be able to vote on it, and if you are a liberal person, or you're even in a reddish state like Kansas,
liberal states like Ohio and Kansas, which like he was alluding to, like kind of an awkward reality, which is the pro-life position is not as popular as they were hoping.
Right.
He was owning it.
Yeah. So he did say that. So he did a couple things. One is he did do that, which I thought was politically advantageous, and then the other thing that he did do, which he has not done in some of his previous attempts to moderate on this, which is he still drew a contrast. Even though he was moderating, he still drew a contrast with Kamala Harris, saying, okay, she wants abortion through the 9th month, maybe even after that, and all this other stuff. So I think that to my ear, a lot of the stuff that he said, I think will be reassuring to pro-lifers, right? Not that they're happy about it necessarily with everything that he said, but he definitely did draw the contrast. So I thought that was fine.
Yeah, that's fair. I thought it was a little, so JD Vance has said that he would veto the federal abortion ban. And Trump disavowed that and said, look, that's not going to happen because it's not going to come to... He's correct, but...
Yeah, Trump gave the answer that I, after the fact, suggested JD should have given, which is you don't answer the question, you just say it's not going to happen and, change the subject.
Yeah, so I think with the abortion thing, he needs to be very, very consistent and clear, because he is actually the moderate,
right?
In the way, so he is. I mean, basically, like, yeah, he can say he's pro-life as he wants to, but operationally, he knows in the short term, in most of these states, it's not going to work out, and so he is a centrist, and he is giving giving marching orders to the pro-life movement, because the marching order is like, you need to persuade people, like, I'm returning it to you. It's like, beyond this, it's out of my hands. I do have to say, on abortion, they did ask Kamala, like, I think they asked her, is there any point in the pregnancy or, like, late abortions that you would be, you're opposed to? And she dodged the question.
Yes. Right.
She changed the subject. She didn't want to talk about it.
Right. Yeah. So that's, and I think Trump even tried to press her on it, like, say, what do you think about, 9th month, or 8th month or 7th month? Right. And she would not answer that. Which again, probably from a political strategy point, it's good for her to not answer that, because that's not popular, so you don't want.
The more you talk about it, the more she loses.
Yeah.
Even if she gives, say, an answer that will make pro-lifers happy, for example, if she even did that,
right, that
would be news.
Yeah.
And people would be talking about 3rd trimester abortions, which is not what she wants them to be talking about. So she just like did not talk about it, changed the subject, pivoted around to him. He tried to bring it back. She refused to. So I thought, on the points, I think she did a pretty good job on that.
Yeah.
I don't really understand. I don't know how she would do better. Like, you focus, like, pivot away from the unpopular parts of your position and focus on the popular parts. Is exactly what she did. I thought she was. I will say, I thought she was. Because you could see the face. I think she was nervous. She was not comfortable.
Yeah, she sounded very nervous, and yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, Trump was comfortable. He might have been too comfortable, candidly. Just
Right.
I think he didn't. I think the time went fast for him because he was talking. Sometimes he was talking about things that he was focused on or fixated on, like Viktor Orban, how Viktor Orban loves him. You're like, okay, like nobody knows who that is. Just stuff like that. Or his rallies. You want to talk about his rallies.
Yes.
Again.
And this, I think, was probably a strategic move on her part, to bring up stuff like the rallies, or there was what I find a kind of ironic, funny thing, which is recently. So Trump has been going on a lot of podcasts, and Mr. Trump, if you are out there and would like to come on Conversations, we will give you as much time as you would like. But so he's been going on a lot of podcasts, to try and appeal to undecided voters, which I think is probably a good move, just given the demographics of who is actually undecided out there. But he was on the Lex Friedman podcast. And in that podcast, they were talking about the 2020 election. And Trump said, I lost that election by a whisker, right? Which is true in the electoral, like in the electoral college, you move a few, maybe 50,000 votes around, maybe 100,000 votes. I don't know exactly how many you'd need, but he could have won, right? So, which is significant. So in the debate, they asked him, well, you've all along said that you won in 2020. And on this podcast, you said you lost by a whisker. So does that mean that you are now like accepting that Joe Biden won that election, right? And of course, Trump says, no, I was being sarcastic. I totally won and there was fraud and blah, blah, blah. And it's funny because in one sense, it's like probably it would help Trump politically to just say, yeah, I'm not going to contest the 2020 election anymore, because that's a big thing that his opponents fault him for, and that a lot of people, I think, are, even people who are Trump sympathetic are maybe a little queasy about it. It's like, why are we still talking about 2020? Can't you just accept it and move on? And so it's funny that he treated that like the popular answer was something that he had to disavow, right?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I was saying is, I've said this a chat group, right? And it's like, I felt since this, I mean, definitely after Biden, but I think before Biden, dropped out, I felt like, in sports, there's a situation near the end of the season where, if you win the games, you're going to be in the playoffs. You control your own destiny.
Yeah.
Whereas there are other situations where another team has to get knocked out or something.
Yeah.
I feel like Trump has controlled his own destiny.
Right.
And, a lot of the issues in his campaign go back to some of his instincts, which can serve him well in some contexts and in some races and sometimes, but are not necessarily generally optimal, Yeah. So, it's like a debate, you can't let people flow. Like you can't when they bring up a topic, you gotta address it. Right? That's how it is a debate. You lose on points. But in this sort of debate, if if Kamala Harris needles you, you don't have to address it.
Right.
What you do is you do a broadside about how she's flip flopped on everything, which is obviously what they had coached him to do, because he rushed a bunch of stuff about flip flops near the end. Yeah. That's what you should do. That controls your own destiny, right? But Trump reacts to the baiting, and he might get the better of it, but when it comes to net, he might have been better actually just hammering Kamala Harris instead of defending himself. So
right, and focusing on the issues that and this was, I think, even the after debate polls showed this, that Trump has the better of the issues on the economy, on the border, on crime. Those are like key issues that he is up on. And the issues that Harris has an advantage on are abortion, reproductive rights, and democracy, right? Which is maybe kind of a catch-all for what stuff that happened after the 2020 election and other stuff like that. So if you're Trump or if you're the Republican, I think like you always want to be pivoting back to the issues that are strong for you. And the beauty of a debate is you don't necessarily have to answer the question. In fact, sometimes it can be advantageous to talk about something else if you want. I will be interested to see, as far as we know, there's not going to be another presidential debate between Trump and Harris. There is going to be a vice presidential debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. And that will be interesting to me to see how those two, like the vice presidential candidates, put forward the same, messages or whatever. They have different strengths and weaknesses than their principles, and so I'm going to be interested to see like how that flows in terms of like can the Republicans just hammer her on economy, border, crime, and then also energy with like fracking, electric vehicle mandates. There's a lot of stuff that they can potentially win.
One thing I said about the debate to a couple friends I was watching the debate with is like, there are certain things, the candidates can say whatever they want to. People don't trust them on that issue. So, for example,
right.
I know that you thought that Trump gave a good answer to the abortion question, but he should not be talking about this as much as he can because people do not, on the whole, trust the Republicans on abortion. Okay, not Obama's. That was a slip. Kamala.
Well, I guess they all look alike to you.
All right, whatever. You know what I'm saying. Kamala, any second that she spends on immigration is a lost second, is a loss for her, because nobody trusts the Democrats on immigration. Like they could talk about putting like a barbed wire, like 100-foot barbed wire metal fence, and they could do it, and people would be like, "What's the catch? Like, are there secret like underpasses?" Like people just don't, and they rightfully don't. Like even the Democrats who are open borders or whatever, they also don't believe. You know what I'm saying? Nobody believes that they're going to do these things now. And I want to talk about this later in the pay section about immigration. The fact is, Obama actually did do some things, and Clinton was not. The Democrats were different, 10 to 25 years ago.
Yeah, especially, I mean, even as recently as the Bill Clinton presidency, immigration was not a polarized issue in the way that it is now.
Yeah,
and
with the Jordan Commission, Barbara Jordan of Texas, Black American Democrat female, they recommended lower rates, so it wasn't as polarizing. But anyway, I'm just like, there's certain things where, okay, like let's just like get this over with as soon as possible. And like I think that's what they need to do. That's what that and I thought Kamala did an okay job just like brushing off and moving past a lot of the things. She had to address the fact that she flip-flopped on fracking. So she just said I changed my mind, okay?
Right.
I mean, there wasn't anything there because she just like knows. I mean, she's obviously kind of like she can't see past the front of her nose. She committed to all these things that were crazy in 2019.
Right.
But that's because that's where the Democratic electorate was then.
Yeah, trans surgeries for illegal immigrants paid for by the government or something.
And in a debate, she agreed. She said that she'd be okay with like banning private insurance.
Right.
She obviously hadn't thought about that, but like that's a lot of the radical left wing that she was, that her staff like were trying to woo. That's what they wanted. So she said, now obviously, frankly, she's cutting a pretty moderate profile. Yeah. I think like if you're a conservative, if you're a Republican, I think the scary thing about Kamala is, I mean, her policies are not like super exciting, but the really scary thing though is her staff. and like the people that will, the turnover that will continue to happen. The radicalism, in the Democratic Party now in execution comes from the bottom up. It comes from the staff level. People like Biden are just kind of going along with it. Biden clearly didn't care much about domestic policy. He didn't know what the hell was going on. He cared about foreign policy. He put his foot down on some stuff there. But on domestic stuff, he would say whatever needed to be said, whatever they told him to say. Kamala is the same. I don't think she's either here, near or there on some of these radical issues, but she'll just go along with the staff say. And so I think that's what we're gonna have to worry about. That, and everyone's like that to some extent. I mean, Trump had that issue in his first term where he went along with some of the people around him said, even though, I mean, did he, was he really into all that stuff that Paul Ryan wanted? Not necessarily, but he's like, okay, sure, you're the professional,
Yeah, and it is interesting how first both candidates have tried in various ways to kind of move to the center and maintain strategic ambiguity on a number of issues. And there's also even in issues that they were attacking each other for last night, it was strange that they would attack each other for issues where there's not as much daylight between them as you might think. So, for example, I think Harris was talking about the tariffs that Trump had put on China, and then both Trump and then even the moderator said, but the Biden administration kept those tariffs, right? They didn't get rid of them. And then on Afghanistan, Trump was attacking how the withdrawal was implemented, and Harris was attacking how it was negotiated. But there is broadly continuity that both of them wanted to get out of Afghanistan. So, there were several things that were like that.
On trade, the Biden administration has followed Trump's at least stylistic, lead.
Yes, right.
Like we're in a different era, and inshoring, strategic industries, industrial policy, all of that is back. And so when Kamala and him went, back and forth about the chips, we're talking about like, GPU processors and other things that, if you read Chip Wars, there's like TSMC is the only company that can produce it, but there's also like 4 or 5 other companies that need to be involved. It's a very delicate system. So if Taiwan shuts down, that's shut down. Okay. And so there are all sorts of issues with cars now because they're computerized. But they're arguing about this, but all of the problems in this domain go back to Clinton, Bush 2, and Obama.
Yeah.
They're the ones that really set the terms for our outsourcing of this whole manufacturing capacity. Obviously, Trump started rhetorically beating the drum and doing some real things, and Biden has just gone along with it. So it's like they were bickering about something that was somebody else's fault, candidly.
Right, and I guess that's politics for you, but it was interesting in that way. I guess in some cases, if you don't disagree on policy, maybe you have to make it more personal. I'm not sure. I would say, and I don't mean this as a knock on either of the candidates, but if you go back, I mentioned that the first presidential debate was in 1960, Nixon versus Kennedy. It's on YouTube. Watch a few minutes of that and compare it to the way debates are now. It's very striking. Right. It's very striking, the difference, just both in terms of tone, substance. Frankly, the 60 debate I would consider pretty boring. They again also like agreed about a bunch of stuff. They did not have like what are the sharp policy differences between Kennedy, who was a liberal Republican, and Kennedy, who was a moderate Democrat, and Nixon, who was a liberal Republican. On anything, really.
The missile gap, which was fake.
Yeah. Well, they had to come up with a fake issue because...
Yeah, Kennedy ran on the missile gap. That was fake.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So the parties were not polarized. Before we move on to immigration, we'll pay all that. I want to talk about something that I noticed yesterday that caused a little bit of grumbling in the audience, and I was thinking about it. Trump ended really negatively on a Debbie Downer. And I know that that's one of his things. Like, we're a nation in decline. Things are bad here.
Right.
You can say some of that some ways, but like, people also need a little bit of hope. And obviously I have, there are people, I have friends who are like, MAGA, people, and they're pretty black pilled on the United States and, whatever. Okay, there's just like, there's a lot of weird subcultures out there that think the United States sucks. Like, the far left thinks it sucks, the far right thinks it sucks. That's not a normal viewpoint. Even when things are bad, people try to be optimistic. That's kind of the American way. And so, again, I don't think it matters that he said it in the debate, but I think it matters in terms of going forward. I think you should watch the declinism, almost like gleeful, recitation of this, because it's just demotivating, and it like makes you not. I mean, if you're a marginal voter, and there are some out there, do you want to go with someone who's basically like really sucks, or someone who's optimistic? You're gonna go with someone that like gives you supposedly the good deal, even if they can't execute. Anyway, that's one thing that I would say. He's been doing this on and off for 8 years, and it's worked some of the time, but I don't know. I feel like this is not the time right now, but that's just me.
Okay. Well, as you know, I'm a very pessimistic person, just personally or whatever. So maybe.
Yeah. So you're basically like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Right.
We are irredeemable.
All of Rome,
yeah. It's not gonna get any better from here.
That's right.
The
line is true romance. As bad as it is now, that's as good as it's ever going to get, and it'll never be that good again. Right.
Well, I will say, like, just empirically, like, I think like I'm less black pilled than I was 4 years ago, mostly because we have no competition. Like, during like the early years of the pandemic, China has their shit together, and some of these like East Asian nations have this information technology to like track people and shut down all these things, right? And the United States looked a little shambolic. Right. I think now 2024. I mean, we're looking pretty good, and I feel like it's not like it was. I think we have opportunity.
Yeah, Europe doesn't look great. China looks less of a serious competitor, at least in the near term. India, I won't say anything about. So yeah, we may be the leper with the most fingers in terms of all sorts of issues.
Yeah, and so this goes to the second topic I want to talk about, which is kind of like, normally I talk about current events, and this is kind of current eventsy, and it's about immigration. But we can like go a little bit into the policy. So we'll pair all this section. So I guess what I would say is, with the immigration issue, hope you enjoyed the podcast so far. To listen to the rest of it, please go to conversation.substack.com.
Two minds met on a summer's eve, each with truths they long believed. Words flowed like a winding stream as hours passed in deep debate. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. In listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed worlds apart, but patience bridged the divide. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. They spoke of justice, spoke of change, of history's weight and future's range. Their views at first seemed miles apart, but patience bridged the divide. It's not about who's wrong or right, but understanding others' light. In civil discourse we can find ties that gently bind. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see the shared humanity. As dawn broke soft on dewy grass, they smiled and shook hands at last. Two souls enriched by reason talk, united in respect. And after all was said and done, they found a thread of common ground. And listening close, they came to see a shared humanity. This folk song captures the essence of a long, thoughtful discussion between two public intellectuals. It emphasizes the power of patient listening, mutual respect, and the discovery of common ground. The gentle tone reflects the common understanding they reach after their debate. Would you like me to expand on any aspect